So today we're going to be covering 9.4. So if you remember last class, we were covering 9.3 and we were looking at the stages of prenatal development. So basically the stages of development that the embryo goes through, and then when the embryo turns into a fetus, the stages of development that the fetus goes through. Okay, so literally all the development that happens to that baby before the baby is born. In other words, okay, so that's what we call prenatal development. Okay, pre meaning before, and natal referring to things that are related to babies, okay, or infants there. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be kind of building on our knowledge of 9.3. And now we're going to look at what role parents have in terms of helping their babies to achieve optimal prenatal development. Now, we've come across the word optimal in Unit 1 earlier in the year. Can anyone in the chat box maybe give me one or two words that kind of define what optimal means? What does the word optimal mean? Yeah, highest or the best possible. Excellent. Good work. Okay, so optimal basically means the highest possible or the best possible development. Okay, or if we're talking about optimal health, we're talking about the best possible for the situation that you're in, for the circumstances. You are doing your best. That's what optimal means. Okay, so optimal prenatal development means what can parents do to give their children the best head start in life and the best possible or the highest possible prenatal development. Okay, and we're going to look at all the factors that influence the child's prenatal development while they're still in the mother's womb in this spread today. So the first thing we're looking at is the fact that it's very important for parents to really think things through when they are thinking about prenatal development, as well as antenatal care. Antenatal care is a little bit different from prenatal development. Antenatal care is after the baby is born. How are the parents monitoring the health of that baby, the development of that baby, once the baby is actually out in the world, okay, once the baby's actually born. And this obviously requires having access to antenatal care. In Australia, in Victoria, in Melbourne, we've got really good antenatal care services. You know, you've got maternal health nurses who can even come to your home. For example, if you're not able to visit them, they can actually come to your home and check on your baby if your baby's in an unstable condition, for example, and it's not good for them to travel here and there. You've also got, access to community services that allow you to have, the regular immunizations that the baby requires, that allow you to, if you're worried about your baby's development, you can go speak to someone about that, okay? Whether it's a maternal health nurse, whether it's a maternal health nurse, or whether it's a doctor, you can go speak to them about that. Okay, so basically antenatal care is important after the baby's born because it allows the baby and the mother to both monitor their health. Sometimes mothers get under a lot of stress as well, okay? And there are things like, for example, postpartum depression that can develop in mothers after they've given birth to a baby. So it's really important to basically have antenatal care because that allows the mother to kind of keep a check on her health, as well as keep a check on the baby's health and development there. And if there are any risk factors from the beginning, we can kind of identify them right at the beginning, right at the get-go, and we can kind of look for any medical interventions if necessary for those particular, risk factors or for those particular things you might be worried about there. Okay, so that's what antenatal care is. So remember, prenatal means before the baby's born. Anti starts with the letter A, and that stands for after the baby's born. Okay, after the baby's born. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, there are some factors that can influence a baby's or a child's prenatal development. Okay, so the development that they're experiencing while they're still in the womb. One of those is diet. We're looking at a specific nutrient, and we've learned about this nutrient before in chapter 4. It's called folate. Okay, folate or folic acid is basically a vitamin or a nutrient that's very important for women who are, of childbearing age, who are basically potentially capable of having a baby. Okay, so when we're talking about folate, we have to remember that folate is important because it actually prevents neural tube defects. It ensures that the spine of the baby, which is this part here, is built in such a way or is developed in such a way that it's normal development. Okay. As you can see here, there's a little bump. That bump is not normal. Okay. That bump indicates abnormal spinal tube development. Okay. And this is a condition that can happen in babies called spina bifida. Spinal bifida is what we call as a neural tube or a spinal tube defect. Okay, it's when the baby's spine doesn't develop in a normal kind of coordinated straight way there. It develops in such a way that there's a lump or there's a protrusion there. Okay, and that is the result of the mother not eating enough or not consuming enough folate. Okay, sometimes you can't get all the folate you can from food. A lot of pregnant women are actually prescribed supplements from their doctors, like take this folate nutrient supplement, it'll, help you to build up your folate levels, or take this iron supplement, it'll help you to build up your iron levels. Okay, but women can obtain folate from food. It's not something like vitamin D where it's a little bit harder to get from food. Folate is in a wide range of foods as well. So when we're talking about, women and how they can increase their folate intake during pregnancy, they can eat a wide range of foods. A lot of your folate comes from your green leafy vegetables. So things like spinach, silver beet, kale, all those things are really high in folate. Poultry as well. So poultry, we're talking about things like chicken. Okay, chicken is high in folate too. Eggs, cereals. Okay, a lot of cereals are what we call as fortified. Does anyone remember what the word fortified means? When I say a cereal that's fortified with folate, what does the word fortified mean? If you can remember from Unit 1. Put it in the chat box if you remember. Okay, so fortified basically means that you're adding that, okay? It's not naturally occurring in cereal, but you're adding the folate during the manufacturing process, okay? We're also talking about things like citrus fruits, which are things like oranges, lemons. Those are also high in folate, okay? People might not eat lemons, but they can obviously make a little lemonade or something out of that. Legumes are things like lentils, okay? Chickpeas, kidney beans, all that stuff. What else do we have here? That's basically what we can eat in order to ensure proper folate levels during pregnancy. Okay, again, it's very important for the mother to have that either through food, or if the mother can't have that through food, then she can obviously take a folate supplement. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now remember, you don't need to memorize this definition of spina bifida like word to word, okay, with the whole, there's a few technical terms in there like vertebrae and stuff. Just talk about the fact that spina bifida refers to a neural tube defect that results from an inadequate consumption of folate during pregnancy, and it leads to the spine kind of sticking out or protruding out of the normal spinal column there. Okay, that's the basic idea. So yeah, you don't have to memorize that definition word to word, just have an understanding and just remember what this picture looks like. This is a good visual aid for you to remember what spina bifida is. Okay, so that's one influence, folate. Okay, the next one is iodine. Iodine is, again, another mineral, another nutrient that's important for pregnant women to be consuming, because this actually allows for the baby's brain and nervous system to develop normally. Okay, what that means is that if folate is important for the baby's spinal cord and spinal tube development or neural tube development, iodine is actually important for the baby's brain and nervous system development. And obviously, similar to other nutrients where the mother has to consume more during pregnancy, iodine is one of those nutrients where we don't need a whole lot during normal life, like when you're not pregnant, but when you are pregnant, you do require larger amounts compared to normal. Okay, so if the mother experiences a deficiency in iodine, like she's not eating enough foods that have iodine in them, the baby is at risk of effects related to poor brain and nervous system development. So related to things like stunted growth, where you're not growing to your best potential there, or intellectual disability. So things like autism, Down syndrome, those things are at an increased risk there. Okay. As Australia doesn't have a lot of iodine concentration in the soil, what this means is that in some countries, the soil is very rich and the soil is very fertile in the sense that there's a lot of iodine present in the soil. So when you grow carrots or when you grow potatoes in that soil, those, whatever crops you're growing, absorb that iodine in the soil. Unfortunately, in Australia, we don't have a lot of iodine concentration in our soil, okay? So that means that similar to folate, a lot of iodine in our food is fortified, okay? Especially when we're talking about foods like, bread, for example, something that doesn't naturally have that in it. Bread, salt, they've actually added that at the production level. Again, that's what we call as fortifying the foods. Okay, fortifying food doesn't mean that it's fake. It doesn't mean that it's not good for your health. It's actually a good way for us to actually consume these nutrients or these minerals more common foods. For example, not all of us eat, let's say, prawns every day. Okay, not all of us eat tuna every day. Okay, but we all eat bread. Okay, we all have salt in some form or the other in our food. Okay, so basically, we're able to still get that iodine because of this process of fortifying there. Okay, now one reason why more people are iodine deficient, okay, pregnant women tend to be iodine deficient the most, but in general as a whole, we are quite deficient in iodine as a population. Okay, one reason for that is that when Australians started to reduce their salt intake, when it started to come out that too much salt was not good for your health, that it would increase the risk of high blood pressure, that it would increase the rates of cardiovascular disease, a lot of people started to reduce their salt intake. Okay, and because a lot of your iodine is found in iodized salt, when Australians reduced their salt intake, they also ended up reducing their overall iodine intake as well. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why this can occur. And if we ever ask you, provide one reason for why iodine levels may be lower in pregnant women, you can give this as a reason. Okay. Now, for women who are trying to increase their iodine intake, iodine can be found in a wide range of foods. You can find it in all the foods in this picture here. In addition, you can also find it in foods like seaweed. Okay, you can find it in milk, but not like almond milk. We're talking about like cow's milk or dairy milk here. And we're talking about strawberries. Okay, so these are some other foods other than like your general seafood items that you can find iodine in. Okay, so women would be encouraged to eat a wide range of these foods there to get their proper iodine intake. Okay, so just remember, folate's important for the neural tube development, and iodine is important for the brain and nervous system development of the baby there. Okay, the next one is iron. Iron is one that we're more familiar with because we learned about it a lot in chapter 4. We learned about anemia in chapter 4. Okay, so hopefully you guys have a better understanding of iron than the other two we just looked at. Iron is basically important because iron forms the heme component, okay, of the hemoglobin of our red blood cells. And red blood cells are basically the blood cells of our body that transport oxygen to all our cells. Okay, without oxygen reaching all the cells in our body, we're not going to have the sufficient energy that we need to complete the different tasks. Okay, now iron is required more so by pregnant women because that when you're pregnant, you're basically carrying a huge weight. Okay, as the baby grows in your tummy, you're carrying that baby, and your weight's going to increase. Some women's weight increases by 15, 20, 25 kilos even for some women. Okay, again, it depends from women to women. Some women don't even look pregnant when they're pregnant, but some women look like, they're going to explode. So it really, really depends on who you are and your individual characteristics and physical characteristics there. But regardless of who you are, regardless of how big your tummy looks or how little it looks, all pregnant women do get bigger during their pregnancy, okay? And as they get bigger, it gets harder for them to move around. It gets harder for them to do the activities they used to do, okay? Even something as simple as sleeping in bed, for example, is hard for them. They can't just, sleep on their tummy. They might not get enough sleep, okay? So we have to remember that there are increased demands for energy and for oxygen to reach all the cells of that pregnant woman's body, okay? As well as reach the developing fetus. So now, obviously, in the same way that there's this saying that all pregnant women eat for two, which is not exactly accurate, you have to remember that pregnant women are basically requiring energy requirements now that are both for the fetus that she's carrying as well as for herself. Okay, so in order to meet those increased energy requirements, in order to ensure that oxygen reaches each of the cells there is an increased need for iron. Okay, so iron is important because, like I said before, it's important for hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is what allows that oxygen to be carried around the body by the red blood cells. Okay, we also need to remember that the developing fetus okay, actually takes all the nutrients. Remember, we said that when the mother is, carrying the baby doesn't just sit there. The baby actually absorbs everything, okay? It absorbs all the good stuff that the mother gives through the placenta, and it also absorbs all the bad stuff, as we're going to learn in the next few slides, okay? But if the mother is eating just enough iron that she was eating when she was a single person, or when she was, for example, not pregnant, that's not going to be enough. That's probably going to be enough for the baby because it goes straight to the baby, but then she gets deficient, or she gets inadequate intake as a result of that. Because remember, the fetus is taking everything. This is the reason why sometimes mothers are literally drained during pregnancy, but then they end up having really healthy babies. The reason for that is that even if the mother's intake of a nutrient is inadequate or insufficient, the baby actually takes the best of what the mother has. So the baby will take everything and draw everything from the mother, even to the extent that the mother goes kind of empty. Okay, that's why you see mothers who are really growing up in really conditions that are full of poverty, where they don't have enough access to nutritious food, but they end up having babies that are completely healthy. Okay, because the babies take every little bit of that nutrient from the mother, whatever the mother has. Okay. Now, pregnant women can access good sources of iron. We know from red meat. So red meat is stuff like beef, goat, lamb. Okay, all of those kinds of meat there. And these, we said, have the highest concentration of bioavailable iron, or iron that's best absorbed by the body. Okay, fortified cereals, again, some cereals have iron added to them during the manufacturing process. Egg yolks, okay, which is the yellow part of the egg, that's very high in iron. Legumes like lentils, chickpeas, nuts, green leafy vegetables as well, like spinach, kale, and stuff. And remember, I told you guys that example when we were doing chapter 4 earlier in the year, that if you're ever eating a steak or something that's high in iron, what did we say was the best drink to have along with that steak to maximize iron absorption? Can anyone remember? And if you do, put it in the chat box. Yeah, so basically that's what we're talking about when we're talking about iron consumption. Yeah, orange juice, excellent. So orange juice is the best drink that we can have when we're eating a food that's high in iron, because vitamin C, which is what orange juice is full of, can actually help to increase your iron absorption. Okay, increase the chances that you're going to get the best of the best iron intake out of that steak that you're eating, or out of those eggs that you're eating, or out of that green leafy vegetable that you're eating. Okay, so a few things can influence or interfere with your iron absorption. This applies for everyone. Okay, so a lot of people are iron deficient in today's world. Okay, a lot of people have anemia in today's world caused by that iron deficiency. The issue is that when you're eating too much fiber, if you're consuming too much alcohol, or if you're having too much tannic acid, which is something we find in tea, all of these things can actually reduce the chances of you absorbing iron properly. Okay, and so a lot of pregnant women, obviously alcohol is harmful in other ways, but some of the reasons pregnant women reduce their tea intake or reduce their alcohol intake during pregnancy is so that they can absorb iron in the best way. So there's no barriers there to them absorbing iron properly. Okay. So yeah, that's basically what we talk about when we talk about iron. The reason that obviously normal life, you never want to develop anemia. It makes you completely exhausted, makes you tired, makes you unable to do the things you need to do in your life. But especially when you're pregnant, you do not want to develop iron deficiency anemia. The reason being that if you develop iron deficiency anemia when pregnant, while you're carrying a baby, that can actually increase the risk of a premature birth, which means you give birth earlier than term and you don't carry to full term. And what that means is your baby might be in ICU for a few weeks or a few months there before you can actually take the baby home. So that's not something we want. And a low birth weight baby. Low birth weight babies are also a problem because they actually increase the chances of complications for the mother, and actually don't allow the baby to come out into the world with the best possible health and the best possible development there. Okay, so iron deficiency anemia can increase the risk of those two things happening. So that's the basic idea there. Okay, so that's the effect of iron. Okay. Now we're looking at some dangers, okay? Some things that as a pregnant woman, you should be avoiding, or basically that you should be reducing the intake of, okay? Obviously with pregnancy, a lot of the time people say, you play it safe. If you don't know that, for example, eating eggs is completely good for you, or eating soft cheese is good for you, or eating salad is good for you, just avoid it. Like don't double guess yourself, because you're carrying a life inside of you and you can't take the risk. Okay, so these are some foods that you should be avoiding as a pregnant woman. Okay, number one is obviously foods that contain the bacteria Listeria. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, why would we eat foods that even have bacteria in them? Doesn't that mean we'll get food poisoning? Well, it doesn't really mean that, because some foods that we eat every day naturally have a specific bacteria in them, which doesn't really affect us to such an extent if we're like just, not pregnant. But if we're pregnant, it can increase the chances of miscarriage, which means the mother loses the baby, stillbirth, which means the mother carries the baby, but the baby comes out like dead, or premature labor risk, which means that the mum gives birth before carrying to full term. She gives birth before her expected due date. Okay, these are all risks for the mother because they put the mother's life at risk as well. Okay, because all of these come with birth complications as well. So what kind of food should the mother be avoiding? There's a big list here. I just want you guys to know any two. Okay, some foods you should be avoiding are surprisingly soft serve ice cream. So you can't go through Macca's drive-through anymore and get a cone. Okay, that's not going to work if you're a pregnant woman. Now, this doesn't mean normal ice cream though, okay? The way that soft serve ice cream works is, if you've ever worked at Macca's or one of those fast food things, is that it comes through a machine, okay? The process of making that ice cream, the texture that it is, involves this bacteria there, okay, which again, like I said, we're not going to get food poisoning by eating soft serve, but as a pregnant woman, it's something you should avoid, just so you don't get into contact with this bacteria there. Okay, unpasteurized foods and soft cheeses like camembert, brie, ricotta, all of those soft cheeses can be dangerous as well to eat when you're pregnant. Okay, unless they're cooked and served hot, because then the heat kind of kills the bacteria. Pre-cooked or prepared cold foods like quiches, deli meat, salad from buffets, pate, raw seafood like sashimi, oysters, smoked seafood such as salmon. All of these things, they're issues or they're problematic because they are raw. Okay, and that means that the chances of that bacteria forming are greater. Okay, a lot of the time you'll see that pregnant women tend to avoid buffets, because in buffets the food has been left out for a while, okay, and the chances of bacteria forming are greater. Okay, and these raw foods are generally like a no-go zone. It's better to just cook the food, heat it up well, so that you can see that the bacteria has been killed there. Okay, also foods that contain high levels of mercury can put the baby at risk. Okay, and basically how that puts the baby at risk is that they might have delayed development. Okay, so they might not, for example, speak at the normal time that a baby speaks, or they might not start crawling or walking at the same time that's expected of them. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Foods that have high levels of mercury are things like, for example, tuna. Okay, some fish, some other types of fish also have high levels of mercury, and so women have to be very careful when they're pregnant about what kinds of fish they eat. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Okay, so that's basically some foods that pregnant women should avoid. Okay, pregnant women should not avoid cake, hence the picture of the cake. Let's see. Parental smoking and tobacco smoke in the home. So this is an example of what we called last class as a teratogen, okay? A teratogen is anything or any substance or any practice that can harm the developing baby, because the harm can actually go through the placenta and affect the baby inside. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now, parental smoking means that either the mother smokes. Tobacco smoke in the home means that maybe the mother doesn't smoke, but her husband smokes, okay, or her oldest child or something smokes, okay, if she's got an adult child there. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now, both of these are an issue. Obviously, it's more of an issue if the mum is smoking directly, but we might all understand that, passive smoking, which is basically being surrounded by people who smoke, can be still bad for you. Okay, it's not as bad as directly smoking, but it can be bad, okay, especially if you're pregnant and you're carrying a baby there. So the reason that tobacco smoke is dangerous for the baby is that we know tobacco smoke contains thousands of chemicals, okay, and when the mother inhales that smoke, it actually goes to the baby and kind of chokes the baby or kind of suffocates the baby in that placenta. Okay, we said the placenta is like a pouch, and that pouch allows oxygen and nutrients to come to the baby. Okay, when tobacco smoke is inhaled by the mother, either directly or indirectly, it actually cuts off the oxygen that the baby's having. And the baby, as you can see in this picture here, finds it a lot more difficult to breathe. Okay. As a result of this, there are also many risks that the baby can be exposed to. And you just need to learn any two here. But we're talking about things like being born with a low birth weight, spontaneous abortion, which means the baby the baby basically dies, okay, or the chances of stillbirth are increased. Prematurity, which means the baby is born before full term. Complications of the placenta, which means the placenta doesn't act as this kind of like pouch where, proper nutrients can permeate through, or that transfer or that permeation is affected there. Lung functioning issues, okay, the baby might be born with some respiratory conditions there, as well as perinatal mortality. Perinatal means that small period of time before and after birth, okay, where the baby can die within maybe 24, 48, 72 hours, like that. Okay, now, for pregnant women who live with one or more smokers, the home can be a source of exposure to secondhand smoking via passive smoking. Okay, this can still have similar effects to the mother smoking herself. And that's why it's very important for the mother, for the wife and the husband to kind of discuss this, or for the two, partners to discuss this and basically say, okay, when I'm, don't smoke in the home, or, go outside to some park or some place and smoke and then come back. We don't want tobacco smoke in the home. So they've got to come to that agreement there. Okay. And again, this is one of the considerations of becoming a parent, that you have to sacrifice some of those habits that could be harmful to your new baby there. Okay. While the mother is pregnant. Okay. And then we've got alcohol use during pregnancy. So alcohol use is also an example of a teratogen. It's a substance or a practice that harms the developing baby by harming or by by alcohol kind of going through and permeating through the placenta and then affecting the baby. Alcohol can cause problems even before a mother becomes pregnant, because it can actually influence a person's ability to become pregnant in the first place, okay? In fact, alcohol can actually cause a lot of women to have issues with fertility, which is a woman's ability to get pregnant, okay? When alcohol is consumed, so let's say you are pregnant and you are consuming alcohol still, the issue with that is that it actually crosses the placenta. Like I said, it permeates, or it goes through the placenta from the mother's blood to the baby's blood. This can result in a really kind of scary condition called fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, okay, also abbreviated as FASD. What fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is that the baby is born looking a little bit different from a normally developed baby because of this mother's continued consumption of alcohol during pregnancy, okay, because of the progressive impact of that teratogen of alcohol continuing to cross through the placenta every day or every week or every time the mother drank alcohol for those 9 months that she was carrying the baby. First of all, the issue with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is that the baby is at risk of dying before birth. Okay, if you're a mother and you're continuing to consume alcohol, not giving up your alcohol habits, your baby, first of all, if it is born healthy and it is born, alive, it's like a miracle. It's like, how did that happen? It's not usual for that to happen. Okay. Because the alcohol generally has a progressive impact of harming the nervous system, of harming the physical development of that baby. However, when babies are born, and a lot of babies are born to women who are alcoholics or who are consuming alcohol, who don't give up the habit during pregnancy, your baby is going to have fetal alcohol syndrome. This is an example of a real life image of a girl or a baby who was born having fetal alcohol syndrome. And this is her probably at maybe 4 years of age there, or 5 years of age. And there are some issues you can see here in terms of physical development, showing that there was a stunted physical development or an impairment or an interruption there because of the mother's continued consumption of alcohol. So you can see here, for example, the child has a very thin upper lip, which hasn't developed fully. The baby's nose is very short, okay? It's got a smooth philtrum, which means normally people have a little ridge here, okay? This baby doesn't have that. Okay, and you've also got a short fissure length for the eye as well. Okay, so you can see one eye is very slightly shorter than the other. Okay, Not noticeable at first, but these are some symptoms that babies who are born to mothers who are alcoholics for the course of their pregnancy can experience. Okay. Other issues which are not apparent in the image here, but are apparent in this diagram are things like having a smaller head. Okay. Because again, brain development doesn't happen as fast in babies who are affected by fetal alcohol syndrome. So the brain doesn't grow in the normal development that it does. So for that reason, the head doesn't grow as well, as big as it should be. The cheeks are quite flat, okay? And the jaw is also a bit underdeveloped there, okay? So that's the basic idea. So just know what fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is and know any 2 characteristics that we can see in a child or a baby who has a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder there. Okay. Okay, that's it, guys, for today. So just remember that smoking and alcohol are what we call as teratogens. Okay, remember the word teratogens. It's very important. That's a key word that we need to remember. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop the recording here.